And the mistake that Christianity made is they wanted to use the same book that the Israelites were using. Then they could not compete because they don't understand it, right? And the Israelites did. So you don't want to give way to the Israelites and then you play second fiddle if it's your land. You want to be the top dog, and this goes to the appearance issue, that all the Christians, they call them, how do I say this? The so-called white man was a Christian, and the so-called black man was not. He was heathen. I think the Pope will call them Saracens or Moors or whatever, And all of these things were exposed then, but what it did is give Christianity an upper hand over everybody else.
Christianity gave birth in the time of Paul. Not saying that Paul started Christianity, but in that time, it kind of started to grow. And as the Israelites migrated, did that migration give Christianity that room to grow and build and become a powerhouse?
Well, I have to disagree with that statement because there was no Christianity until about the 16th century. What happened at the time of Paul was that we sent him out as a minister to teach, to introduce to the Gentiles and the opportunity to learn about our God who created the heavens and the earth. It is one thing to know that you exist, regardless of who you are, but it is another thing to know why and to know who created all of what you are taking for granted and enjoying and benefiting from. So Paul went to teach them, to share with them the wisdom of our Israelite forefathers, and he did a very good job. However, he was constantly battling idolatry all over Europe, and it didn't begin there. It started out in Babylon, and then it went from Babylon to Egypt, and it was magnified in Egypt. And a lot of the Europeans benefited from from Egyptian knowledge, Egyptian wisdom, under the name of the Kabbalah. The Greeks got it by way of the Phoenicians, and then they passed it on to the Romans, and then the Romans were also in Egypt, and they got some of it. So before you knew it, all this idolatry is prevalent throughout all of Europe. And that is what gave them the confidence and to challenge what our forefathers were trying to teach. Because, we might think, well, yeah, we serve the right God and everything, and I appreciate that. But they got results from their God too. So you cannot negate that they were in a position of power as well. And all that we could do is to continue to do according to the terms of the covenant. And sometimes that works for us, but it doesn't work for anyone else outside.
Idolatry, you're talking about worshiping one God, many gods?
Idolatry is worshiping false gods.
False gods, okay.
Yeah, but we only would know who is false and who is real. And if we don't get a chance to teach you, then you're not going to know, but you will benefit. I think today they call it voodoo or obia. That's where the cross comes into play. And some of the Europeans, they wear the cross on their forehead when they worship. It's black, cube. And then others, they unfold it. And it becomes, so one is a cube when it's folded. And when it's unfolded, then it becomes the cross.
I see. Now, I have to ask, in the scriptures, it does mention Christian. Is Christian different from Christianity?
Yes.
How so?
Christian is, well, first of all, Christian was spelled Criten, because I think it's French or Swiss, one of those origins. And it means retard, idiot, stupid, anything like that. Because our Israelite forefathers were called Christians at Antioch about the year 50. Notice, they were called Christians by the Gentiles. But the question begs itself, who were they before they were called Christians? And even after they were called Christians. So it's like my throwing the N-word at somebody. it doesn't identify them. It's just an insult, you see? So I always find it rather interesting because if they called us Christians in the year 50, then they adopted that name. Now they're using the N-word, right? Are they going to use that word as a philosophy, one of their religious experience?
I see.
Eventually? And how much time is it going to take before they call themselves the N-word? So yes, that word meant retard, and it reflected a medical condition. It was a thyroid disorder. And the thyroid gland, for those of you that know, if it's overly stimulated, then you can grow up to 7 feet tall or higher. If it's understimulated, then you become a dwarf. And, when you got a dwarf, you have a big head, you got hands that are probably too long for your body. So everything is messed up. And not only that, in appearance, you not only look unattractive, from some people anyway, you also have a mental disorder. So then I did this research years ago, and I thought the word Christian, the way it is spelled, it's not that bad. But when you understand it's not that spelling, that's the English version of it.
Right.
But the original version of it wasn't like that. It's French or Latin or something, Cretin. And I invite your audience to take a look and investigate this for themselves and see exactly what I'm saying. Now, what would make them use that term? That's the question.
Yeah.
So let's say I remembered when the Romans went into the temple in Jerusalem. It was Titus, I believe. And he was looking for the God, because how are these people? There's just a handful of people, but they're so good at fighting, and if they fight in the Roman Empire, come on, guys. And you're making us having second thoughts about the battle sometimes. Who is your God? And they went to look, because they had Mars and Jupiter and Apollo and Zeus and everybody.
Yeah.
And when they looked, they went to the temple. There's nothing, no image. At best, there was just a 7-branch candlestick. They're like, where's the God? But they took that anyway.
Right.
Right? And they have an arch in Rome today that reflect that. The key here is, how is it then that these people, Israelites, could worship a God that they cannot see? And we, as Gentile Europeans, we have dozens of gods, and we got us images for every one of them.
That's right.
They must be retards. They must be Christians. And the only people that they could identify that was the people in the Alpine region that looked strange and acted strange.
Israelites back then were called Christian as an insult, and Christian is not somebody's identity.
That's correct.
It's just an insult.
That's correct. Because the only objection came from the Israelites in North Africa, around Carthage and Numidia.
Okay.
And they did something that was completely different from what the Romans were doing. Obviously, that would create a conflict. And as the Romans started to get stronger and stronger, and the papacy started to grow, and they put a betrayer, someone to betray the Israelites within the capital, so to speak, which is the capital is the temple of Saturn, where they worship the different gods, and that was in Rome. Then things took a turn for the worst. And after going back and forth over time, they had enough power, the Catholics then, to step in and use military force, amongst other things, to force the Israelites to stop what they were doing, even if they did not want to continue to start to serve the gods of the Romans. They had to at least say, well, you can't do that anymore. They did that through violence. They burned them at the stake. They beheaded many of them. They burnt the Bibles that were translated in Latin back in the day, because Latin was called the ecclesiastical language, meaning the priestly language of the Israelites. And even Jerome, I don't know if you remember him, he had to translate from Latin into the Vulgar Latin, and hence it was called the Vulgate, because the Romans could not read it. It was too high for them. All of this occurred between the 3rd and the 5th century. After the demise of our Israelite forefathers from Numidia and Carthage, big things started to happen. We had the Teutonic tribes north of Germany, and they came down upon the Roman Empire and destroyed it. The Teutonics were barbarians. In other words, they were totally ignorant, but my friend, they could fight. The best military in all of Europe. And they demolished that entire Roman Empire. It was almost like the hand of God was moving them to do this. Don't know. But at the end of the result in the 4th century, the Christianity had gone through some major, or what I call Christianity today, because it wasn't named Christianity yet. It was still idolatry. It went through some major changes, whereby they had to move the headquarters from Rome to Constantinople in the east. When that occurred, and that occurred because of the Teutonics and the Khazars coming down upon them. When that occurred, then the Muslims came in from the east and overrun Constantinople. Then they had to move it from Constantinople, that is the headquarters of this idolatry, to Russia, to St. Petersburg, Russia. So now you have the Teutonics, who have inherited Christianity by making deals with the papacy. They send in the Goths, the Huns, the Angles, the Vikings, the Saxons. There's many of them, many different tribes. And if you watch the Game of Thrones or the Vikings, you will see what I'm talking about. Excellent when it comes to military, but when it comes to brain power, zero, nothing. But they did a great job. And so you had these two, one primarily Japhetic, which would be the Teutons, and then the Muslims, Shemitic, and they coming in, and they almost destroyed all of Europe. Almost. Remember I said that when I was a boy, there were Muslim territories, Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, and all those places in the Eastern Europe at the time of the Soviet Union that were full-fledged Islamic back then, just as if you had gone to Iran or Iraq. So suddenly, our forefathers now are no longer a force to be reckoned with in Europe. But now you have to deal, like as I said, with these other people who are going to support the Vatican. And they did. And they are still doing it until this day. So all of that occurred. Our forefathers had to flee across the desert. And, some of them coming also from Spain and Portugal for their lives to get out of that region, because now they are the enemy. And when they got to Western Africa, of course, they became fodder for Islam and Christianity to be sold into slavery. And that occurred shortly after the 5th century. But even before that, or during that process, there were many battles fought between the Muslims and the Israelites. And today I always remember Fez, and I think Fez is a city in Morocco, if I get my geography correct. But it was at Fez where the Muslims issued the decree or the edict, convert or die. That was a statement that was made to the Israelites that were living there at the time. And they lived there, like I said, way back from the time of the apostles until now. And convert or die, and those that did not convert were slaughtered. Wow. And the Muslims, they took their turbans off and dipped it in the blood of the Fez. And that is even today, if you are a good Mason, you wore a red turban or a red fez, as they call it. You even carry you dress like a Muslim. You even carry the little sword, or what do they call that? I'm not sure, as the Muslims did back in the day. So hence you can see that relationship between Islam and Christianity. And it is still there. And you can put Judaism in the midst of that. And it is strong now. It might appear, if you watch CNN, that it is not strong, but it is very, very strong. And a lot of people don't understand it. It is so strong that for many years, if you study Freemasonry, you will see that the Masonic head of the Israelis is not a Gentile European like the others. He is Arab, and he's not the first. And I always remembered back in the day when the Israelis captured Jerusalem, that at Mason Hall in London, there were Muslims and those that practice Judaism celebrating, toasting. And you have to ask yourself, why? I mean, that's none of my business. I'm just saying it because it came out of all of this destruction of our forefathers of North Africa. And I see a lot, but I don't say anything because it's none of my business. My interest is strictly on Israel, not the Israelis, you see? And this is where I'm able to draw the line and be comfortable, because everybody wants to be an Israelite. Everybody wants, but they don't want to follow the instructions of what it takes to become an Israelite. And they want to be an Israelite because they know that our doors are open to everybody. Once you can find your way, you can come and we will teach you. It doesn't care what you look like or how much money you got, or if you don't have any money. But you have to follow the instructions as given by Moses given by the God of Israel to Moses to give to our forefathers. And that's how it is.
Now, you said the Masons. When I see them, I see a lot of Egyptian symbolisms. And I also find it in Roman Catholic. Why is there so many pyramids and obelisks in these different philosophies? Let's just call it.
It is there for a reason. If you follow the teaching of Masonry, if you follow the teaching of Christianity, if you follow the teaching of Islam, if you follow the teaching of Judaism, there's one thing that they all have in common, and that is the philosophy of the Kabbalah, which is an Egyptian Babylonian structure. So they have to serve their God. They all celebrate, whether it's Festival of Lights, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Hanukkah. Why is it all at that same time? Why does everybody get together and do what they got to do? Again, I'm not here to criticize anybody. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you one thing. I admire them. I really do. Because I always say, if we, as children of slavery, can get 10% of the discipline that they have when they're serving their God, we would be one of the most powerful nations on this earth. But what I'm here to say, a different way of thinking, a new way of thinking, as a matter of fact, is that all of those wars were fought for spiritual reasons. Because everybody wanted Russia to give up the authority back to Rome. And the Russians would say, you know what? The first Rome fell, the second Rome fell, but the third Rome is still standing. And again, investigate this. And they refuse to give it up. So they say, back in the day when Hitler came into power, he came to set up the third, was it the third or the second? I forgot. The third Christian Reich, I think. And the Reich was empire. And he, again, we can get into all this, but we'll just keep it short. In other words, he wanted to establish the third Christian empire, and he wanted to do it out of Germany, with Germany as the headquarters, or at least having some major impact thereof. And he was correct in what he wanted to do. He's absolutely accurate, because the priesthood was based initially at Rome, but all the princes came from Germany. So he was correct in what he was doing under that spiritual and political protocol. And obviously the Russians say, we're not giving up. Because I guess if you have the headquarters in your neighborhood or you're responsible, you get some kind of privileges, and nothing like cash when it comes to privileges, right? Mm-hmm. So I have to side with them on this matter. Not that I am involved, I'm just saying it makes sense. But even today, all I'm saying is there's that animosity that prevails between the different European countries, the Americas, etc., because of that spiritual impact that occurred way back when everybody was trying to overthrow our forefathers, to be the head rather than the tail, and to benefit accordingly. So I'm saying that because they took advantage of an opportunity, they're now stuck in that same mode of deception and hatred and violence that they can't get out of. And yes, we are caught up because we are citizens in these countries, but it is always good to know why there's so much conflict that has nothing to do with us today, but may have started back in the day when things were different.
You spoke about all these different nations that had power and the wars they fought. Who's in power now?
Now is a very, very uncertain time. Mm-hmm. And we have people in the United States who are claiming power, but then there are people in Europe who are claiming power. The Chinese are claiming power. The Russians are claiming power. Even in the East, we have other nations that are smaller that are claiming power. But I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the umbrella that they're all under.
I see.
And that tells you something, that they themselves are being deceived. And the reason I'm saying this is not because I want to criticize them. I want our people, our Israelite children, not to follow in their footsteps, to stay away from that. You're in the world, but you're not of the world. And regardless of what they're doing, they're not serving our God. So we have to understand that this is the reason why we went through the process of the migration from Jerusalem to Virginia. And now that our time is up, we can't go back to Jerusalem, but we could go back to our Father because he controls everything.
So this spiritual warfare and this chess game is still being played today.
Still being played. It's they can't get out of it because you have to sign a contract. Sometimes we look at some of the entertainers and we wonder why are they behaving the way they're behaving. It's because they signed the contract. You've got to watch what you do, right? And I don't want to call any names, but there were some that I used to enjoy listening to. Some of the ladies were very attractive to look at. Mm-hmm. But when I see what I saw them doing and saying, I had to turn away. What I hear, some of the rap tunes that have nothing to do with our progression, I have to turn them off. We didn't get into the fact we talked about how we help to empower the nations, but if you ever go to London and you're Trafalgar Square, and then you go up to your friend Elizabeth, tell her hello, and you walked in and look up on the right-hand side as you get into the first of all, you'll see the change in the cobblestone. And then, if you have a spiritual eye, you'll know why, but I'm not going to say it.
Okay.
And then when you look up, you see this Assyrian god. He's got wings. He's naked. You see? So when I saw him, I was like, wow, this is Assyria. Mm. He's right at the entrance to the path, the Buckingham Palace.
So they just recycle these old gods. Is that the reason why you look in America, you see a lot of Egyptian obelisks and pyramids? They're using that same old spirit of Egypt of old?
That's the key. And the European does not understand that he is deceived. He's a vessel, and he's been deceived. But he benefits from that deception. So it's going to be difficult for you or I to tell him not to do what he does. And some of them are very good at it too. The key here is we don't really want to be judgmental. We just want to be aware of what's happening. And we see a lot of this going on. And we understand some of the struggles. But most importantly, we understand that there is going to be a day of judgment or an era of judgment. Right? Everyone is going to be accountable for their behavior. And I don't know how the Creator is going to judge. All I know is he is going to judge. And if we want to know, we could look back at the ancient. Look at Babylon and what he did to that place. It's no longer. But one can say that same spirit that was there has found its way over here. Like you said, the obelisk, you can't set up an obelisk and just put it up as a symbol of nothing. With that obelisk comes the spirit of the Egyptian. When you put up the cross comes the spirit of the Egyptian and the Babylonian. When you put the cube on your forehead, the spirit of Saturn is there, or Satan. But people sometimes, they don't think about these things because the benefits are so overwhelming. What's a little spirit when you got 10 billion in the bank? You can work it out. You see? These things are very, very, very important to be aware of. You and I, we don't have to try to deter that type of behavior. We just have to shut it out from the contents of our material, from our homes, for example, and teach our children. Because today, all the children, even our children, are suspect when they're out there in the world. Everything now is on your phone, right? You don't have to go to the temple anymore, right? It's right there. It's in the music you listen to. And the people that are making the music that look like me, they're not aware. Because sometimes they are told what to say, how to do it. And if you look at this repetition, there's a lot to be said for that. Because when these things are repeated over and over and over, they're not the lyrics of the days of old when they had a storyline. There's just repetition. They go right into your mental faculties, into your spiritual zone. Then you have no control. And add to that the drugs and the fashion and everything else, you're messed up. But who am I to tell them what to do and what not to do? My job is to show them that there's a new way of thinking, that there is a God that we serve that created the heavens and the earth, and that he is worthy of our worship and praises. If we can take the time to dedicate towards his glorification, don't matter who you are or where you come from or what you look like, you can benefit tremendously. But if you follow everybody else at your expense, you cannot gain. It is as simple as that.